my today I'll be talking to you about my third paper. So I'm doing a PhD by article, and you may have noticed that the title has changed from a multilingual school to two multilingual London schools because another school has come on board. But before we talk about the project, I do always start my talks with a bit about me because I think my experiences have shaped my research interests and maybe the fact that I'm a bit critical. So, both of my parents were born in Ghana and came to London in the 80s. So, I'm born and raised in London, and I don't speak my heritage language, which is Tree, but I understand it completely. And actually, according to my grandmother, I could speak the language, and then I stopped speaking the language um, once I started attending nursery. And that's really common for a lot of my friends that are also of African descent. Um, but I love being a Londoner. I grew up in a really linguistically and ethnically diverse place. So it's not like we were the minority, and that's why I didn't want to speak my language. It was actually school and its monolingual ideology that's ingrained in the entire education system, I would say, that encouraged or discouraged me from trying to be proficient in my heritage language. Okay. And also being from White Hart Lane, there's a really big Turkish community. So I was very interested in the fact that my Turkish peers were fluent in their language, so were the Colombian families. But typically, in my experience, parents or families of African descent were there was a real mix. Some of us could and some of us couldn't. The majority couldn't speak the heritage language. And professionally, well, I've stopped working now because I don't know why I thought I could work and do a PhD at the same time. But when I was working, I worked as a speech and language advisor, and I that meant that I was constantly in lots of different settings, usually early years settings. So the schools that I worked with, because it was a project related to EAL students, so students that have English as an additional language, the project that I worked on meant that I engaged with settings that were doing lots of things for multilingual children. But something I noticed was that when I looked at the students and I looked at the languages that were represented on displays, the books in the dual language book corner, the language teachers that were paid to come in, they were never the languages of the African peoples, even when African peoples were the majority. So I found that quite strange, and that encouraged me to do a paper on it. So that this was my master's thesis. I was really interested in the language attitudes of African migrant bilingual parents and also early years practitioners in the UK. So, how do they feel about African languages or languages in general? And what are they doing with the languages in the classroom for early years practitioners? And what are African migrant parents doing with their languages? So, you'll see some quotes on the screen. These are quotes from the early years practitioners in this study. Surprise, surprise, they didn't actually even acknowledge the bilingualism of the African peoples. There was a real lack of knowledge, and I would say very much the approach was to just turn a blind eye to their bilingualism. So nothing was really done about it. They didn't really see the point, and these feelings were mirrored by the parents. So I noticed that a lot of the parents were not listing their African language on the forms. So when parents sign up for their children to attend these schools, they have to write down the home languages. Lots of the parents were just putting English. And I thought that's a bit strange. So when I asked them questions, it became very apparent to me that they had really negative language attitudes. Part of our interviews discussed their schooling experiences. So the parents went to schools where English or French or Portuguese was the language of instruction and were very much punished if they were speaking anything but that European, I would say, imported language. So it wasn't really a surprise to me, but it was also quite disheartening to me. And I thought, I don't really want to just complain. I want to do something. So that's what this project is about. I'm hoping to work with schools to do something about this. So I have some data from paper one. Sorry about the dots, they'll make sense in a second. So paper one for me was a linguistic landscape study where I went around lots of schools in London and I took photos of the languages that could be seen. So I need to cover the children's faces. This school is actually part of this project that I'm talking about today. So they're in paper three. And as you can see, I'm not sure if you can see, but a lot of the pupils are from Nigeria. We also have quite a lot of pupils from Jamaica. This is just in the nursery. And it's also quite a very monolingual school. So the only language here that the teacher has decided to highlight is Spanish. I thought that was quite strange. I asked her why, and she said that she really wanted her Spanish pupils to and their families to know that their language is valuable. This is a really nice message, especially for a teacher working in a very monolingual school, in terms of visually, there isn't much going on to represent the children's languages. So that's a really nice idea, but I can't help but think it's almost as if there's a certain type of bilingualism that's appreciated in schools. And I'll show you some data from another school. This is a school it's a secondary school, also in the same part of London. And sorry, I couldn't get rid of the dots. But in this school, they have a real range of different language GCSEs, from Turkish to Japanese to Russian to Polish, on and on and on and on and on. And I noticed the only time again that African bilingualism is mentioned in this school is if the pupils are taking a GCSE in Portuguese or in French, right? These are the posters that are around the school. It is as if these peoples from these countries only speak a European language. And this is also a school where Yoruba is apparently the third most spoken language. I'm not sure if that sentence makes sense. And first of all, I don't even believe the statistics. I don't believe parents are honest. In this school, you see a really large percentage of homes where English is listed as the home language. But I know from research, from lived experience, that parents sometimes just put English down because they think that's the right thing to do. So the statistics aren't accurate, but it's likely that Yoruba is a very highly spoken language in this school. And there was no resource for Yoruba in this school at all, not even a poster. And a final image from a primary school in, I don't want to say the area, but in London. And I thought this was beautiful. They have after school language clubs. They encourage children and their parents and staff to write the word of the week in their own language. But then I also thought, I wonder if how inclusive this is of pupils of African descent, because from the interviews I've had with my African parents from my master's thesis and just in conversations, a lot of the African parents are actually not literate in their African language. They're only literate in the European imported language because that was the language of instruction at school, and it was less likely for them to have access to quality text. So a lot of them can't read in the language and a lot of them can't write in the language. I know this isn't always the case, I should say that, but this is what I'm hearing from the parents that I speak to. So I just thought, what does this do to the linguistic identities of African peoples when they're aware that they can't take part in these kinds of really popular translanguaging activities? And you can't see this photo. I don't know if you can even see my cursor. So I've blown the photo up so you can see it here. This is, I think it was a language and culture day. Schools do all sorts of things or these schools, these are the gold standard schools, they do all sorts of things where they try and celebrate the linguistic diversity among their students. And again, because it's not my fault, I'm just like quite critical. I can see Somali there, but I thought it was really interesting that French, Portuguese, and English were being held by Black children. Now, I'm not 100% sure if it could be the case that these children just speak these languages. They happen to be born in these countries and they speak these languages. But how cool would it be if these children, if they are from maybe a francophone African country or a lusophone African country or an anglophone African country, they were holding two signs up, like I speak Lingala and I speak French, right? Or I speak Yoruba and I speak English. This is also the problem with flags that I try to express to teachers. Okay, so if you haven't read Oakley Welpley's paper on decolonizing English as an additional language, I highly recommend you do. It's saying everything that I think. So what we're seeing in education, different levels of education, is that approaches, a kind of one size fits all approach is put forward, and we're really kind of turning a blind eye to history, colonialism, social context, right? But that's not helpful, especially for these kinds of peoples, because that really has shaped their parents' language ideologies. So, what I'm hoping to do through my project is really encourage educators to critically reflect on their ideas of inclusion. It's not enough to print off a welcome poster from, I don't want to say it, from an educational publisher, right? Because that poster is likely to just have European languages and maybe Mandarin and maybe Japanese. Like look at the pupils in your class. That may not work, right? And then a lot of this work focuses on initial teacher education, which is so important because there is barely anything going on for kind of EAL training early on. But we really need things that help support continued professional development. So a lot of the teachers that I engage with have been doing what they've been doing for 20 years. And that's problematic because then you think what you're doing is just okay and normal. But what you're doing is outdated if you've been doing the same thing for 20 years. We need teachers to be having access to research, so to inform their teaching, right? Okay, so these are the project objectives. I'm hoping to increase the critical awareness and the visibility of African languages, because if from my linguistic landscape study, my paper one, you'd think there are no African pupils in these schools when they're actually the majority. I'd also hope to improve the attitudes among pupils, parents, and teachers. So I'm hoping to do that through surveys, before pre and post surveys. And then hopefully there'll be some recommendations that other schools can look to and think, oh, I can do this. I can have a coffee morning. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize my laptop is low. I'll switch it on in a second. But I wanted to go to the next slide. So I will leave this on screen while I switch my laptop charger on so that you can see the very different schools that are part of my sample. Oops. Okay, so as you can see, they are very different schools. School 2 has literally just come on board, so I don't have statistics of the pupils, but the head of multilingualism told me there are just a few pupils from Kenya and Angola. So African pupils are basically the minority in this school, and in school 1, they're absolutely the majority. So very different. One's a private school, one's a state school. In one of the schools, we have a head of multilingualism. So there's someone who has responsibility to ensure that pupils' languages are represented. And then in the other school, we have a deputy head of inclusion. She's very passionate about racial inclusion. So their whole curriculum is, just to give you some information on them, their whole curriculum is called a racially literate curriculum. So the pupils are constantly seeing people that look like them in the curriculum. It's something they have to do. The school's been awarded many times for their curriculum. They don't even have Black History Month because they are constantly looking at Black figures and across subjects, whereas School 2 do celebrate Black History Month, at a very low-key level. School 2 engages a lot with researchers, so very different context here. The head of multilingualism is of Polish heritage. He's trying to relearn Polish. His wife is actually Ghanaian. And then the deputy head of inclusion, she's dealing with a high number of special educational needs. This isn't really her thing. There's no designated EL department, so they're very different. She is of mixed Caribbean and white British ancestry, although she was fostered. So she grew up in the north of England, and both of her adoptive parents were white British. So yeah, very, very different. Interested to see how the differences play out in both of these schools. So the most fitting theoretical framework I thought for me would be critical language awareness or critical multilingual language awareness, because it pays attention to ideas of power and of hierarchy. There's a focus on making teachers aware of histories and colonial oppression. And also, there's just an added layer of focus on self-reflexivity. That's something I keep seeing in all of the studies that have used critical language awareness or critical multilingual language awareness, this framework in their studies. Most of the work that's done using this framework appears to be in North America. So either England is very behind, or we call it something else here that I'm not aware of. But yeah, I assume that Ian Cushing and Julie Snell's work is quite similar to this, but not entirely, because there's a real focus on oracy. And something I really like about this framework is that there's, in all of the studies that use this approach, there's a commitment to changing something. And that's what I want to happen. I want there to be some change happening for the teachers, right? Again, most of the work in this area focuses on initial teacher training, but my work will be more on continued professional development, because I'm not working with trainee teachers. Okay, so these are the research questions that I keep tweaking. I always find something wrong with them. So I'm interested in your thoughts. Number one is, what is the initial level of awareness and visibility of African languages in both schools? Sorry for the typo. So that would kind of be answered by my pre-measurements, my pre-surveys. So I've already kind of got that from the linguistic landscape of School 1. I'm going to complete the linguistic landscape of School 2 in 2 weeks. And then I'll talk about the timeline in a bit. And number two, what changes can be observed over time as a result of collaboration with the researcher? I don't know if this question is clear, so any feedback would be appreciated. Number three, what is the impact of this collaboration on the attitudes of students, teachers, and parents towards African languages? And number four, what strategies can effectively increase visibility and awareness of African languages in these diverse school settings? I'm not sure why I added settings. I'm already criticizing the questions and thinking of things I could do better there. Okay, so here's a really simple timeline, because it was very messy before. But this period, so the initial assessment phase, where I'm kind of using the linguistic landscape as a diagnostic tool, having preliminary conversations, sending out surveys. That's the initial assessment phase from October 2024 to December 2024. Then I hope to implement some awareness strategies. So both the head of inclusion at School 1 and the head of multilingualism at School 2, they've both said that they think a really good starting point would be to discuss my research. So I'm holding like a CPD afternoon/evening where I'll talk through my paper, what it found, what this means, and encourage them to kind of self-reflect and think of strategies themselves that they can do. What I'd really like to do is also invite parents to come and talk to the teachers about their experiences from their home countries, or how they feel about their languages, what they'd like to see in the curriculum, what they'd like to see on a bookshelf. But I'm not sure if parents will be willing to. I'm not sure if it will work that way around, or if I have to encourage the teachers to draw the parents in for, let's say, a coffee morning. That's really common at school one. They regularly have coffee mornings or assemblies. Um, School two regularly has parent engagement days, or they have something coming up. I think it's called a multilingualism day in October. So it may have to be the other way around, where the educators are talking to the parents or kind of facilitating conversations rather than the parents telling the educators. And I think it actually does have to be that way in my context because I'm dealing with parents that may not necessarily value their language or see it as something of importance. So perhaps it has to be the other way around, but I'm happy to hear feedback. And then a midpoint evaluation. And then I will continue making some changes. So maybe I'll trial both ways in the initial implementation stage, and then there'll be some adjustments or changes. Maybe we'll find out that having the coffee mornings doesn't work because lots of these parents are working, so it actually has to be after school in an evening. Yeah, there's too many details on that. Because of the work that I do, I know that you constantly have to make changes to projects to suit so-called hard to reach parents. I don't think there's such thing as hard to reach parents. I think the job's on us to kind of break down barriers. But yes, you never know until you start, and every cohort is different. And then following that, there'll be kind of a final evaluation. So really getting all of the post measures, the post surveys. I didn't say here, but I really want to gather pupil perspectives because from my linguistic landscape study, I noticed that the statistics are incorrect or are not 100% reliable in terms of pupil languages. So um, for one of the schools that I went to, there were no apparent Yoruba speakers at this school. And as I was walking with the assistant head teacher, she stopped a child and asked him what language he speaks at home. And he said Yoruba. And I was really surprised because he's not on the system at all as a Yoruba speaker. So I think children's perspectives will be really interesting because they haven't yet internalized these linguistic hierarchies that I think their parents have. So, but then involving children in research means, well, for me, it's just really painful to get consent from parents and to be aware of who isn't here and who is here. But I thought of having focus groups with from children where consent was given. Okay. Oh, okay. So those are the references, very few references. And I am interested to hear if you have any questions or comments at all. By the way, the translations were done by Google Translate, so I'm not sure if they are 100% accurate. Maybe Hannah can tell us if the Swahili one looks good. And if it does, then maybe that means the rest of them are okay. But thanks very much for your time, and I'll stop sharing now. Swahili looks good. Okay.
Amazing. Thank you, Denise. That was really, really interesting. It was really good to hear about your plans and what you've done so far in terms of going into those schools and seeing the contexts and the kinds of things that you need to focus on. So if people have questions or thoughts, then I think Hannah can allow you to speak. So you can either type questions into the Q&A section or into the chat. Feel free to use whichever one you prefer. I'm looking at both of them. And you can also just indicate that you want to ask a question there, and Hannah will turn you into someone who's allowed to do that.
I was actually going to suggest we set it up as a webinar so we can see each other but all the participants can't. We can actually promote everyone now, so everyone can see each other, and also then Denise knows who's here as well. But yeah, maybe Anthony, I think you had your hand up first, and there's a question in the chat from Uni. So maybe Anthony, if I also promote people, you also don't have to, and I will note we're recording it. So if you'd rather not appear on screen, then of course you don't have to. But otherwise, then everyone will see each other as well.
Okay, so while Hannah's doing that for people with their hands up, so Uni Kim has put a couple of questions into the Q&A. So one thing that she says is, do you think there could be fragility or defensiveness from people who have broadly good intentions, but maybe not the resources or support to implement them until now? Is there scope for certain kinds of co-design of interventions to mitigate this?
Very good question. Hi, Uni, by the way. That's the thing. I haven't started yet, so I'm not sure how the teachers will respond, because they're the ones that will actually implement this. My key contacts, so the head of multilingualism and the head of inclusion, they're senior leadership, so they're less likely to be implementing things on the ground. I have definitely met defensiveness, and this is another thing. I feel like obviously I'm visibly Black, and maybe from my surname they can tell that I'm African. So there may be people who portray like, yeah, I'm interested in this, but they actually don't want to do this. It may seem like another added thing on their already very busy lives. So in my professional work, we've done a lot of co-delivery interventions with schools. So I think I have the knowledge on what the best approach, what not to do. The first thing that I shouldn't be doing is only speaking to senior leadership. I really need to speak to the teachers too. Teachers are under a lot of pressure. They don't actually like when senior leadership say, okay, you have to do this. They want to be involved in the conversation. They want to have a voice and say what works and what doesn't work. So I think my experience from work will hopefully positively influence how the project goes. Did I answer all of your questions? And in terms of resources and support, that's well, I'm hoping to portray that. That's actually what I'm here for. I'm here to do the hard bits for them, to locate the language, to locate books in the language that they can't find, to translate things that they find really tricky. So I have these resources, and that's what I'm hoping to do with them. So not to give them an extra job, but just to encourage them that this is possible. And honestly, to do the bits that they don't want to do. I can see you have another question. Research question 2. You think it makes a lot of sense, but it also breaks down into sub-questions. Yes, about who or what could change. Yep, that's true. Do I have a focus or set of focus areas in mind? Yes, I think the focus would be on the attitudes, not so much the visibility, because the whole visibility concept is actually from paper 1, but it really feeds into painting a picture of the type of schools that these are, and how things change visually, I think is just something I can observe. So it will be part of my kind of linguistic ethnography, just observations like, oh, one of the schools actually that I've done a linguistic landscape on, I went there again for another reason, and I noticed that they had a book in Shona, and the receptionist was really excited to show it to me. So I think my presence will cause some changes, which are interesting to note, but the focus would probably be on the actual teacher attitudes. I hope I answered well enough.
Yeah, thank you. So I did see that there were people with hands up, which have now disappeared. So that was, oh yeah. So Anthony Messer, if you'd like to unmute on that.
Hi, Denise. Yeah, thank you for the research. It's very important research, very good research that you're doing. And it's very relatable because my situation, I'm a Kenyan and I moved to the UK when I was 10, and I'm trying to create a dictionary in my own heritage language, Dholuo. And I'm facing the same, I mean, I'm not just speaking to parents or teachers, but I'm just facing the same attitude when I go to conferences or when I speak to my colleagues about having that dictionary. And it's very relatable, all the things that you're talking about, where the older generation and the language prestige of English. And I mean, I was interested in the comment about one of the students who said that they can learn another language, Mandarin, because it's good for business. So it's quite interesting, the research that you're doing, and yeah, it'd be good to read it when it's done. Yeah, well done.
Thank you so much.
Was there another hand up before? Lutz.
Thank you very much, Denise. Really interesting work. I have a small question and a comment. The question is just, I was curious that the second school came on stream so late. So I was just wondering about, how do you go about, making contact with schools, and, why is it 2 rather than 4, or would 1 be fine? And so how that came about. And then the other common question is, and I think you have so much on your plate already, but I was also wondering, at some point you said, you didn't want to mention the publisher who has these nice little, promotion materials for multilingualism, but that made me think, so there's a whole other dimension of infrastructure around schools, right? So publishers sit in that space, and I'm partly asking, it might be an interesting conversation. Hannah knows former students of our Zahida Nabareka. She is with Penguin, I think, and was very much involved in, school pedagogy, school books, Africa representation. So I think, that, so there's a discussion there as well, and then maybe also local councils. I would imagine people are sitting there. So I don't think you can do all these things, but it's just interesting also to see what your perception is of the wider infrastructure, maybe.
Yep, thanks so much. So in terms of the schools, school 1, I met the head at a conference on racial inclusion in primary years, and they were actually presenting how amazing their curriculum is, because they have completely restructured it, and now it's a racially literate curriculum, and it features not just like white old men, it's got different kinds of people. So that's where we met, and we had a brief conversation. I'm really apprehensive about what's a nicer word for forcing. I really only want schools that are keen to reach me. I feel as though if I reach out to them, because of my experience with project work, if the school themselves or someone at senior leadership themselves doesn't have they're not intrinsically motivated to participate, it's just so tricky. It's just, I'll spend way too much time, my limited time, trying to get them to respond to emails, trying to pin them down to a date, because they're not interested in this kind of work, which majority of the schools, most schools aren't actually interested in languages. That's number 1. And then we have the hierarchies. So these schools are the ones that have contacted me so far. And then school 2, I met the head at a workshop. It was about how do we harness multilingualism in schools, and we just got on. His wife is Ghanaian, so I presented my work, and he was really interested in that. So it starts from me talking about my work, and if they're interested, most schools kind of are absolutely not interested. So at the racial inclusion conference, I spoke to about 40 head teachers of schools that were saying they want to do more to promote racial inclusion, and only 1 person even took my information sheet. So I think linguistic inclusion, a lot of teachers in the UK have the perception that home languages are for home, it's not their responsibility, but they're actually the key agents. They actually really positively or negatively influence children's perceptions of their own culture and themselves. They also influence parental language attitudes, and the most typical time for a bilingual home to switch to English monolingualism is in the early years. And that's because that's when children start school. So it's really important for teachers in the early years right up to have awareness of the power that they hold. Sorry, I'm going off on a tangent now. Sorry.
No, not at all. Really interesting. And I'm interested also that these contexts happen at these workshops. So that's also for me really, I wasn't quite aware of what the academic infrastructure there is. So that's really nice as well. And what you say about languages, of course, that that we are all aware of, and that's really another big problem. In never mind the African languages, but there's a whole negative attitude towards languages in general.
Yeah.
But then again, I think your work is so important in that, because, like you say, if you in your specific case, that if you say that for African languages it really matters, that then hopefully also has a positive trickle-on effect on language discourses in this country in general. But it is something I think many universities, university departments, subject organizations struggle to fight this sort of negative attitudes and sort of indifference almost about languages.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much, Lutz. Nice to see you. I think Jonathan wanted to ask a question, but I'm not sure.
Hi, Denise. Good to see you again, and I enjoyed hearing about this again. So it was kind of partly answered by Lutz's question. I was also curious about how you went about recruiting the schools for this. I was also curious as to whether or not some of the reticence you've been experiencing in your sampling is just down to how saturated schools and teachers are in terms of time and what they have to deliver as it is. They're so poorly resourced.
Yep.
It's an enormous stumbling block, and one almost wonders if you have to. I don't know how one gets around that, because it's a challenge faced in various different domains. But I wondered if you reflected on this as you were sampling and given the kinds of problems you've incurred along the way.
Yeah, that's why I'm not pushy with recruitment. I actually was happy with just the one school initially. I thought if one person is eager and interested in doing this, maybe this will be the one case study that influences the school next door, that influences the school next door, and we can create like little change eventually. But they really do have no time. Like their contracts actually end at 3:30 and they leave at 6, and they come in much earlier than that. And they're dealing with really different needs and lots of challenges, and Ofsted judging them. So my project, for someone that doesn't have an interest in language, it's just another thing. That's why I'm really keen to, like Lutz mentioned, I'm really keen to be meeting people that are already attending these kinds of workshops because they have this interest. Otherwise, for me, I don't think it's going to work because of the context that we're in.
Yeah, have you had, and sorry, just as a follow-up, have you considered whether or not your intervention should take place at the level of the CPD, given that teachers kind of have to do CPD, and therefore if the intervention takes place there, they may not intrinsically initially be motivated, right? But you could bring them on stream through the intervention itself, right? And that in itself could be something you could track.
That's a very good idea, because I think all teachers are contracted to stay like till 5:30 on a Tuesday to have this CPD time. So it wouldn't seem like an additional thing if it's already timetabled in, and maybe I could work with senior leadership to make sure these are timetabled in ahead of time. Yeah, that's a great idea.
And on top of that, you might even think about PGC provision. Lutz already said you've got a lot going on, but it seems to me that the earlier you get them as well in their professional development, the better.
I definitely think so. I think they'll be more receptive to doing new things and hearing new things, rather than someone that's been doing something for ages and they're fine. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks. Wow, lots of familiar faces. Hi, Teresa.
Hi, I'm okay to ask. Yeah, great. I'm a big fan of your project, so any chance I have to hear about it, I'm always excited, and to see the progress and different stages. So yeah, great work. I was wondering, obviously, I think maybe this is a question like too early because you're gonna go and do this in the schools, but whether you have sort of, for now, encountered, in terms of talking to families or teachers about languages, two things. One is, you were talking about like French and English being like associated with some of the African countries by the teachers and stuff. So whether any mention of like Nigerian English, so like English or French or any of the languages, but sort of a different version, a variety of it, if that came up at all, and if, or you think you might encounter it, and how might that fit into the picture? And related, but maybe not completely, also if in also the work that you have already done, sometimes, there are multiple heritage languages in the family, and then maybe the parents also, might speak maybe English as the home language also for that reason, because they each have a different language. So then that's also how some of the heritage languages like disappear from the information, not just by choice because of the hierarchy, although I agree anecdotally that's also my experience, but also for this other reasons.
Yep. So I've always thought that's the context where it makes sense to me for English to be used, when parents are even from the same country, but maybe different tribes. So I completely get that, but that's not what I see. I see parents from the same ethnic group, ethnic or tribe, or I'm not sure what the correct term is, and they're choosing to speak English despite it not being the language that they're most confident in. So that, yeah, I mean, that makes sense to me. And actually, there was a dad in my sample. He's Ghanaian and his wife is Polish, but he's speaking his language to his daughter. So that's really interesting because that's not what I'd expect. But yeah, I haven't heard of people talking about like different varieties of English. Something I have been seeing though is in the Caribbean context is that their Creole languages are, if it's like Jamaican patois, where the bulk of the vocabulary is English, but maybe there are maybe African influences on the syntax. That's not considered a language to the Jamaican families, and also to the teachers. That's considered slang or broken English. I was really shocked. It is a fully fledged language for me as a linguist, but so I see it in the Caribbean context. I haven't come across it in the African context too much yet. Yeah.
Would anyone else like to ask a question? Hannah?
Yeah, I mean, I can ask a question. Yeah, thanks, Denise. Really interesting, and yeah, always nice to see the things you're working on. I had a couple of comments and questions. So one is about the example you gave where I think the school says no one speaks Yoruba or they don't have that recorded, and then literally you walk past child who says they speak Yoruba at home. And, you know, the work of Sophie Liggins, who you know, who was previously at Essex, in her study, she has basically a sort of lower end is 20 to 30% discrepancy between the school census data on languages and the reporting that comes out of her work. And it touches on many of the issues that you've talked about, but also in terms of how schools record this and the questions they ask, which again, you point out, like, you know, which language allows it only to be one, you know, do you speak at home, allows it again to imply that there's one language at home and outside, so all of these boundaries. So I think that's really interesting, and like thinking about how you can encourage that, you know, breadth of things to be captured. And I think the other thing that's nice that you talk about is like multilingualism. So I don't know if you have any suggestions on how we can kind of like essentially encourage multilingualism and awareness of multilingualism more broadly, specifically in the case of, you know, speakers of African languages. The Caribbean's a different issue again, but like we're just all interested in more languages, you know, being present and supported. So have you got any thoughts on that?
So that's what I was hoping. I could get the parents to bring their own experiences, because there are so many different types of multilingual. What makes up multilingualism? Like there are people that use a completely different script. There are people that write from the right to the left instead of the left to the right. There are people that can't read their language but can speak it fluently. And I really don't think teachers are aware of all these different layers. So I was hoping during the knowledge sharing period that parents could come in and just talk. Maybe that's not how it's going to work. Maybe it's going to be me just having these, maybe on slides, having these different examples of what this looks like. Why do you think all your Congolese children speak French, but actually they speak these many languages? I think I'll know. Maybe I need to do a pilot. Sorry, I just thought about this, because I don't think I'm going to know a lot of things until I try. So I think I might need to do a mini pilot with a school that I know really well. That might actually work, and I could get consent very quickly before starting. But yeah, I think that's a really good thing. And then also really including children in this process, because like I said, the children don't have these hierarchies embedded in them just yet. So I didn't show you this, but in my linguistic landscape study for another school, the amount of languages the children painted on a mural was like 50 times more than what the statistics say. So really including child voice. And if you think about it, the statistics are reported by the parents. So actually the parents are the ones that may not be giving us the complete truth. But again, it could be because of how the teachers or the school is asking for this information. I know when I was at school, I really remember this. They asked, what languages or what language does your child speak at home on a form? And my mum wrote English. And I remember thinking, but I'm constantly hearing your language, which is Tree. So I'm at a disadvantage to a child. Disadvantage? No, I'm having a very different experience of English language input than a monolingual English child. And the school should know this. but they won't know this because of how the questions are. So that's probably the first CPD presentation, talking about how we record data.
Thank you very much.
No worries. And thanks, Jonathan. I totally agree with your comment. Yeah. Yeah, very early on, like as you saw in that photo of the Language and Culture Day where children are holding up flags. Please don't hold up flags. They're not really representative of children's linguistic diversity. It's better to hold up the language and make the language become more well known. But I do believe there's a transition. As I said, I'm really used to working in the early years. And in the early years, children have no idea. They will trans language because that's all they've got. That's just normal to them. They have no idea that this language is more valuable than this language, or this language has more social currency than this language. They're just being themselves. And as they go through our system, they are, can I say, monolingualized, I don't know, and just taught that this is what's valuable. This is what's going to let you stand up at assembly. This is the way you can, this is the language where you can find a dual language book in your area. This is the language that is cool and your teacher will want to hear it and get a sticker for this. And this is the language where the teachers will bother to find a language teacher for you in. And this is where you can watch cool Mickey Mouse dubbed videos. But this has no resources, so kind of what's the purpose of it? And as they grow up, they really carry these things. So that's why I'm happy that School 1 and School 2 have a nursery right up to, actually School 1 only stops at primary school, but School 2 has a nursery and it goes all the way right up to sixth form. I'm really interested in kind of tracking that as well.
If no one has an immediate question, if I could just ask, you mentioned the hard to reach parents, which I totally get why you don't like that term. I know what you mean. But for want of a better one, would you see those as being key to your study? Because I was wondering if maybe they're also the people who are not writing their home languages on the forms, or have potentially those attitudes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, these are the people I really need to reach. These are the people I really want to reach. The schools label them as hard to reach because, for example, at School 2, the head of multilingualism said, "Oh, by the way, you're probably not going to get very many of the African parents attending their multilingualism day. They don't really come to that kind of thing." It's like, why don't they come? There's a reason why they're not coming if they're multilingual. Maybe we're not doing something that's attractive to them. Maybe they're not seeing their multilingualism represented at these days. So it's about me working with them to tease that out. Why is that happening? And where are they coming? And can I reach them there? Could I drag them to my talk, to a presentation? Can I send them a link? Can I send them a video? Can I send them my paper? But these people are very interested in their children's education, which is why they left their home countries to come to the UK. Most of the time, that's what I've been told in my interviews. It was for their children's education. A lot of the parents that I engage with, especially at School 2, actually, were already from middle-class homes where education is very valuable. So this idea that they don't care about education, which is what the teachers say, is just not true. And it doesn't come out in conversations with the parents. Especially at fee-paying school, they definitely care about their children's education because they're paying for it. So yeah, sorry, I went off on a tangent again, but I think I just don't see them as hard to reach. I just think it means I'm going to have to try different techniques to get to them, and I'm happy to do that.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
There's possibly time for another tiny question if anyone has one. Otherwise, Lutz has put a comment in chat.
So it's a small thing. It's there. Some of the comments you showed, Denise, I thought were really, anywhere from really interesting to quite sad to also quite funny. So this one struck me with the, Mandarin has tone, so therefore we need to take seriously. When you have Yoruba speaker,
Exactly.
more complex, and so it's all, there's so much also lack of just basic information, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm hoping that's what the CPD can tackle. Yeah.
Okay, well, that seems like, excuse me, a good point to leave it so that people have got time to get to whatever the next thing is. Thank you all very much for coming, and especially thank you, Denise, for a really interesting seminar to kick off the series with. That was really interesting. I think we should invite you back in 2026 so that you can tell us what you've done between now and then. So we have more talks in the series lined up, and keep an eye out because there's a couple yet to be scheduled, which will hopefully be during October, but the next one scheduled is in early November. So we will email about those nearer the time and send you Zoom links and so on. But for now, yeah, thanks everyone for coming, and let us thank Denise for this really interesting presentation.
Thanks everyone for your comments.